Hello everyone, my name is Claudiu Moise and this is an introduction to Bootstrap for CES 300. In this video, I will be explaining the basics of what Bootstrap is for anybody who is curious about how it works. Now, this video won't teach you everything you need to make your own Bootstrap website. However, I will link you to some other tutorials if you're interested in carrying on. This is just going to give you some exposure to it and a fundamental understanding. First of all, the question we should ask ourselves is just what is Bootstraps? So first of all, it's made by the people who made Twitter and is often referred to as Twitter Bootstraps. Bootstrap fits into what we call a front-end framework. Front-end meaning that everything is handled client-side, meaning there's no servers, no networks, nothing happening behind the hood. And a framework is just a set of tools and themes for us to jumpstart the development process. When I first started researching this, I thought Bootstrap was some sort of application which just built websites for you. But no, it's actually made for web developers who want to build their own website. So in other words, you still have to code. Now let's go over some of the benefits and drawbacks of Bootstraps. First of all, Bootstrap is pretty easy to use as long as you have a basic understanding of HTML and CSS. You can save a great deal of time making fancy graphics because you have these helper classes and pre-built elements which you can just simply call like you can regular classes, and they'll do things that developers need to do on a regular basis, such as building a navigation structure, implementing breadcrumbs, creating a jumbotron, or like a carousel for announcements. You don't have to create multiple websites for different devices. You can just have one website for all of them and simply change your code to accommodate that. Also, Bootstrap has what's called a grid system, which I'll be showing off later. Now, some of the drawbacks is that Bootstrap isn't exactly for complete beginners. If you never coded a web page in your life, Bootstraps is probably not the place that you want to start. If you want your website to do something more than just sit there, like play an animation or interact with the user in some way, you'll need to use JavaScript to make that happen. So with Bootstrap, your websites would have a limited amount of interaction to them. The third problem of using Bootstrap sometimes is that it can be a lot to load for some users. And because more and more people are using Bootstraps, if you don't have any other CSS going on, your website will start looking like a lot of other websites out there. I'm not going to make the judgment about whether or not Bootstraps is worth the hassle, because what I've found is that Bootstrap has both helped me and hindered me at some points. Now, without any other further delay, let me take you through a basic coding exercise to show you what Bootstrap is all about. So there are two main ways of using Bootstrap. The first way is to download Bootstrap from here, and what you'll get is a folder which has these three other folders named CSS fonts and JavaScript. So each of these folders contain the necessary files of Bootstrap, and in order to apply them to your project, you need to take these files and drag them into your project folder. All right, and then your project will have access to them if you write the proper link statements. Sorry for the cut. I just linked the style sheets for the Bootstrap templates to my HTML. You could do it the same way that you would with any other style sheet that you would write yourself. Let me show you the other way you can do this. If you go to the Bootstrap website, you go to this section right here, you copy and you paste it right here in your head section. So the section of code which I have just pasted will link us to the Bootstrap website. It'll act in the same way as if I had downloaded the files and had linked to it internally. Now you'll notice here that I have an absolute link. Regardless of the way with which you acquire Bootstrap, it should work the same. So next what I'm going to show you is the kind of website that you could build using Bootstrap. Now if we were to look into the source file of my website right now, you would notice that there are several elements which I have not built on my own. For instance, this nav bar right here is not built by me. All I had to do in order to implement it was to use one of Bootstrap's custom classes called nav. This Jumbotron right here is also something that I have not built on my own. I placed the background image, but Bootstrap is what created this div container and placed it in the way that it is currently now on the screen. You'll also notice below that I have some content, and it's laid out in a peculiar fashion. If we were to take this and make it into squares, you would see that this would be its own square, this would also be its own square, and then this and this, they would also be their own squares. Now, in order to show you some of the things which I didn't build, let me go into some of the Bootstrap example pages. You'll notice right away that this Jumbotron is about the same dimensions as mine, and that the structures of the paragraphs are roughly similar. I added some of my own CSS elements in order to look my website look a little bit different. If we look here, you'll notice also that the nav bar looks quite similar, and its content is also aligned in a peculiar way. You'll also notice these buttons, which I have on my website, which look exactly the same. Alright, now we've been talking quite a lot about the grid system and responsiveness, and these ideas are actually interlinked. If we think about a lot of websites today, their content is actually arranged in a series of boxes, which we could call a table, or more accurately, a grid. Some people know in the early days of the web, that when tables were introduced, they were used as a sort of layout tool. You could think of Bootstrap as a more modern way of implementing this mentality. So to explain a little bit about the grid system, this looks very much like a table, but in fact it is not. Remember earlier when we talked about helper classes and how we created that really cool Jumbotron and navigation structure just by using the word nav and Jumbotron? Well, if we look into the source code, we'll notice that to create a row and column, each div has the class row or the class column. Now you'll notice they're nested exactly as tables would be. However, they do not use the table elements. These still have a use in Bootstrap to create actual tables, but what Bootstrap does is it uses this to create a layout. Now you'll notice although these classes are written differently, they look very much the same. Now, where this comes in useful is the idea of combining classes. In order to achieve responsiveness, Bootstrap combines classes to the documentation for Bootstrap, and you'll see that we have 12 columns of size 1, and if we have a column of size 8, it'll take up 8 of these mid-sized columns. The number of columns is 12. This is very important for designing a layout, as if you have more than 12, you'll get a column drop. So for example, you'll have something like this if your columns surpass the number 12. So you can't have more than 12 on any single row. Now this definitely influences the design possibilities that we have. Now let's have a look at offsets, because it's a great example of combining classes to get what we want using the grid system. You'll notice that we have one column here and another column on the right side, and we do that by telling the second div, adding this second class called column mid offset 4, which will create this offset of 4 column sizes. And how does this relate to responsiveness in Bootstrap? Let me show you. So if we go back to our previous example, we have these divisions here which have varying sizes. These classes will tell the division how to behave in certain circumstances. For instance, column 12 will tell the display to always take up 12 columns, but column 8 will tell it if you're on a size of screen medium, then take up 8 columns. And here we have, and then we have another instruction for this division that says take up 6 columns, and if you're on a medium display, take 4. And you'll also notice that here we have specifications for small, which would be a phone device. Now let's take our browser window and shrink it. And what you'll notice immediately is that our columns have stacked up one on top of the other. This column, now that it's no longer on a medium display, will take up only 8 columns. Since this division is no longer on a medium display, it will now take up 12 columns, and that this one will take up 6. Now, this is a very powerful tool which can help developers very quickly adapt the style of their website to fit mobile platforms, which is the main reason for Bootstrap's popularity. For my final example on the grid system, let me take you to this page that I made. It's called the Masonry Gallery, and I've taken various images from well-known indie games and put them on my website. And I put them in such a way as to make full use of the Bootstrap grid system. You'll notice that I have various column layouts, and if I go ahead and shrink this, you'll notice that Bootstrap does a great job of making sure my mobile users can also access the content on my page. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that it's given you a better insight into Bootstrap.